So, hello, well, I'm back with another video. In my previous one I mentioned the Alan Parsons Project, and I thought, well, why not make a video about my collection of their albums. First, a bit of information. The Alan Parsons Project was essentially a group of two people. Well, it was about they made concept albums. It was a partnership between producer-engineer Alan Parsons, which is famous for Dark Side of the Moon from Pink Floyd. He wasn't actually the producer of that, but he co-engineered it, and he did many other famous things like Al Stewart's Year of the Cat, and he worked with John Miles. And well, his partner that he worked with was Eric Wolfson, and Eric Wolfson was also kind of his manager, and they made the concepts for each album, and they exclusively worked in the studio. They did not perform live because they worked with session musicians, a bit like Steely Dan, I guess. They would just look for certain people that Alan had worked with, and they would work on his albums. He regularly worked with John Miles and Gary Brooker and Lenny Zakatek, Colin Blunstone. Those are basically the vocalists on his albums. Later, Eric Wolfson would also sing some of the songs. And a few members from the band Pilot worked with him. And well, they started in 1975, and by around 1990 they split up. So I guess let's take a look at the albums. This here is the first one. This is Tales of Mystery and Imagination, Edgar Allan Poe. This was released in, I think, 1976. Let's see if I can find it. Well, these are the tracks. It's an album about a novel from Edgar Allan Poe. It's basically a gothic novel. It's not gothic music, by the way, but it's just about a gothic novel, Tales of Mystery and Imagination. Oh, those come next. Well, let's open it up. As you can see, this is a gatefold sleeve with some information about Edgar Allan Poe, and here are some pictures from each song. This is a dream within a dream, and if you browse through this, it's sort of like a booklet. That's the Raven and the Telltale Heart. Well, if you watch The Simpsons, they sometimes mention Edgar Allan Poe's stuff, so that's quite funny. The System of Dr. Tar and Professor Feather, The Fall of the House of Usher, 2-1 in Paradise. Oh, and that's a bit information about Alan Parsons and Eric Wolfson and Andrew Powell. Andrew Powell was an orchestral conductor who worked a lot with them. Well, so this is basically a bit of information, and most of the albums were also released at Abbey Road because Alan Parsons worked there. Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon was also produced there, and Alan also worked with the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and the Abbey Road album were also co-produced by him. Then we have the next album. That's I, Robot. This is an album originally for my dad. When I was 14 years old, I was browsing through the collection of records, and I thought, hey, that's an interesting cover. And this album is loosely based on Asimov's book I, Robot. The only difference is that his book is I, Robot, and this is just I, Robot. The reason is that Alan and Eric could not secure the rights for it, and so they changed that basically. And the picture you see here seems to be taken at Charles de Gaulle Airport. At least that's what I read on Wikipedia. This is the other side of the image, and well, that's a picture of Alan, and well, basically a story a bit about what the album is about. And all these albums are, well, they basically have a, they explore certain concepts. The songs typically have transitions between them and instrumental parts, some rock-oriented songs and some slower songs. They're quite varied. This is the third one. This is iRobot, Pyramid. Also a very nice album, and this is released in 1978. In the 1970s there was a sort of craze about pyramid power. Someone wrote a book and well, they claimed all sorts of superstitious abilities with pyramids, like there was basically a craze with pyramids and certain magical powers, and this album sort of mocks that concept. And you see Alan is kind of having a headache, and this is a picture of some sort of river. This is the rear side. Again, this is the gatefold. Here's a bit of information what it is about. It explores several concepts about pyramids. Later he would also create the album called Eye in the Sky, and that was also has a slightly Egyptian theme about it. But anyway, if you want to know a bit more about pyramid power, you just look it up. But the people were kind of suspicious. For instance, razor blades. If you had a small little pyramid and you would put it somewhere, they would be sharper. And well, also some of the text of the songs. There is a song where that is explained. Let's see if I can find it. Oh yeah, the song. Yeah, I can't focus in on that. Pyramania. Well, that basically explains the whole subject. Then in 1979 they created 2 albums at once. This one, Eve, and an album, The Silicon Revenge, which was not released. It was shelved. They kind of wanted to mock the record company. It has now recently been released as part of a box set as a bonus. But this album basically explores the relationships between men and women. And it tries to look at it from both sexes' perspective. And there was kind of a bit of controversy about this album cover back in the day. Some people say, oh, it was sexist and such, and well, but looking back on it now, I think it was quite innocent. There's just some nice looking models on the cover. Well, that's basically the inside. Also some female folk. This is also the only album by the Alan Parsons Project with female vocalists. When he did Dark Side of the Moon, he worked with 2 female vocalists. I believe let's see if I can look up their name. Let's see, where's the credits? Vocals: Leslie Duncan, and I believe Claire Torrey must have also been involved. Yeah, Claire Torrey. Leslie Duncan and Claire Torrey, they were also involved with Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon in the song with that screaming track. So they also worked with this album. And then we have the one I mentioned earlier, Turn of the Friendly Card. This, well, it looks medieval, but it's not. It's about a middle-aged man who goes gambling and loses all its money. I think it's quite an interesting album because it's basically built up like a suite of different parts. Basically like classical music, where you have one big long song of different sections with transitions between them, and there's kind of a reprise. Well, it's just interesting. You should look it up. It's, well, I think it's their best album. I also have a CD version of it. In fact, I have 2 copies. I also have a remastered version. And then we have another semi-Egyptian one. This is Eye in the Sky. It's probably their most famous album because it features the song Old and Wise. It's a song that I guess most people know from the radio. It's a bit of a classic. And it also has an instrumental intro that is used by the Chicago Bulls. This is a first edition of the album because this is a sort of gold foil thing that they put on, and the later prints just used brown ink. Well, and this symbol is basically the Egyptian eye. It's the Eye of Ra, and this album is basically about belief systems, and it's basically mocks them a little bit. Well, this is the track listing, and this was also the first album that Alan did with a digital sampler called the Fairlight Computer Music Instrument, and there's an instrumental song on this album that is completely made with a Fairlight. So then we have the next one, which is Ammonia Avenue, and Ammonia Avenue features the song Don't Answer Me, also very well known, one of the few things from the radio. This is a DMM mastered version. Well, that's a bit technical, but it has to do with how vinyl records are mastered. There's basically 2 ways of mastering them, and well, DMM was kind of a special process. And this picture you see here is some chemical plant in England. Eric Wolfson once had a guided tour there, and this album basically explores well, the sort of distraction from man between the advances in science, I guess. And originally this was intended as a double album, and the record company said, no, we don't want that, we want you to release about an album every year. And a year later they came with this album, which is Vulture Culture. It's essentially an album with leftovers of Ammonia Avenue, and the concept has slightly changed. If you know Donkey Kong Country, you know there's a level called Vulture Culture, and well, it's a direct reference to the name of this album. Normally the word is actually Culture Vulture, but this album sort of explores the very materialistic 1980s society and criticizes that, and this is well, Eric Wolfson said it was basically a society of vultures. Just the whole, you know, the Reagan-Thatcher era thing, that very business oriented, and that people got really nasty. And this album sort of, actually I think it's very, well, what should you say, relevant today actually. In a lot of ways. And let's take a look at the inner sleeve. This is, well, here's some sort of crystal ball, a knife and a skull. This is the only Alan Parsons album that does not feature an orchestral part, because Alan and Andrew Powell at the same year also made a movie soundtrack, so they were kind of busy. And this is 1986's Stereotomy. This is again another reference to Edgar Allan Poe in a way. It's a very typical mid-1980s album with very hard-hitting drums. I think it's quite good actually. There was also a version where there was some kind of stereoscopic thing going on. Well, and then we come to the CDs. Let's see, what do we have here? This was the first thing I got initially. It's a box set with 5 of the albums, and this one also features the album Gaudi, which was their last album essentially, which is about the Catalan architect Antonio Gaudi. This box set was about 20 euros from bol.com, and it's a nice introduction into their repertoire, as it contains 5 of their albums, and these are the 2007-2008 remastered versions of it. And then this is an original 1984 copy of Turn of the Friendly Card that I bought at a flea market. Interesting difference between this original copy and the remaster is that the remaster is louder. That's quite common these days, but it's not terribly loud like a lot of contemporary productions, because Alan doesn't like the whole loudness war thing. It is a bit, the remaster is a bit louder, but it still retains all the original dynamics. It's really well done actually. And this is a 1984-1983 album, and it's the best of the Alan Parsons Project. This was released after Eye in the Sky. It was basically the first compilation album. So that, I guess that pretty much wraps things up. I guess you if you like progressive rock, then you may want to check it out someday. As I said earlier, they're well known for things like Eye in the Sky and Autumn Wise, but those were only the things that were made on the radio. They didn't really release singles. They were album oriented, and if you only would listen to those songs, you don't really get the whole picture, because they also had many instrumental things, and some of these instrumental parts are also covered by Ed Staring, who made the arcade synthesizer greatest CDs, and that's also where I got to know them a little bit. So that wraps up the video, and I see you guys next time.